Hey everybody, just wanted to record and show you the assembly instructions for Uno. Now that I've shipped them out, you should be seeing them soon. Uh, this obviously is the completed version, but depending on exactly what you ordered, you will either get some with LEDs pre-soldered in the circuit board, or those of you who ordered it unsoldered will get just the circuit board and the LED, which is pretty small. I mean, that's my finger for comparisons. This thing's pretty tiny. Um, if you look at the profile of it, kind of top hat shaped, I guess. And I wanted to go over the assembly instructions. If you did order it unsoldered, this LED will probably be found right in the middle here, just in the package. It does depend on how many you ordered. If you ordered a number of them, then those LEDs and circuit boards might come separately in a little anti-static bag. So what you're going to want to do is take the LED, and this green bar on the back is what's important. That's for orientation. So if we look at the circuit board here, you'll see there's kind of, by the LED hole, this white part of the silk screen. That shows the side that the green bar needs to go on. So if we look at the other side, there's no silk screen around the LED hole, so make sure not to solder it in that way. So you'll take the circuit board like this and orient the LED so that the green stripe is on the same side as that. And you'll just kind of insert it into the back. I find I kind of have to squish it sometimes with the tweezers to get in. There we go. And you'll just want to solder it just like that. And once you've soldered it, you should have something like this. Make sure not to apply the heat for too long. These LEDs are pretty small and don't have a very high thermal capacity, so they can burn out. Once you've soldered that, the next things that you should see in your kit, it'll either come in its own anti-static bag like this, or it might be unwrapped already. But if we just open this up, you'll see the USB controller right here, and it should come with enough pins or more than enough pins to fill all of the header spaces. You'll see we have 3 6-pin headers, but we only need 4, 6, and 6. One final note before we really begin this assembly proper, if you'll notice 2 of these pads have this white silkscreen oval around them. These are the reset pads, so when you're programming it, these are the buttons or the pins that you'll need to short together if you don't have a software reset built into your key map. I say the term key map broadly because it's one button, but whatever. So these are the ones you'll just want to short together to reset it. So the way that I've found it to be easiest is to take this and insert the switch directly into it. And you'll note the footprint. This should support Chalk switches, Alps switches, and Cherry MX switches. So you'll put it in, we'll solder it in place, and then once this is soldered in place, then we'll put the headers on and attach like this the USB controller to our circuit board. So I'm going to go ahead and solder this together, and it'll probably be boring. Okay, we've got the switch soldered in now. It's not the prettiest soldering job I've ever done in my entire life, but it's reasonably straight. And you'll note that the LED hole for the switch lines up with where the LED is placed. So we only need 2 6-pin and 1 4-pin header. So I'd advise taking either a good pair of pliers or end nippers or whatever you want to use and just chopping off 2 of these. And that's again just depending on exactly what showed up in your kit. Some of the controllers that I purchased came with the exact right pins. Some of them came with 3 sets of 6. If it came with 3 6-pin headers, then odds are that your USB controller is one of the ones that I mentioned in my group buy updates that was not exactly what I expected. The footprint was slightly different. than the sample that I received when I was testing these things. So it still works, it's just a little bit frustrating. So we'll insert both the 6 pins and 4 pin, and you'll notice I'm putting them with the long pins down into the controller, and that's just because the controller is a little bit thicker than a normal PCB, so I wanted to make sure that I had plenty of excess. Then we'll take this, and it'll only go on here one way, and you really kind of have to finagle it a little bit if you have the ones that the footprint's slightly different than I planned for. The easiest way that I've found to do it is try and line up the two 6-pin headers first. The bottom one is like a little bit too far down, but if you can get that one on, then just kind of push everything up, and then just press it down into place. That'll work quite well. And it actually is kind of wedged into position during your soldering, so it's not a terrible concern. Okay, so now that we've got everything soldered up, it's not exactly super pretty, but the top ones are short enough that we don't have to trim them, and the bottom ones are long enough that they're pretty easy to trim if you want to use, you know, some sort of end trimmer or whatever you have. Once we clean up all these pins, then you'll have to program it with QMK. But now that those are all trimmed up, you can put a keychain through here or whatever. If you really want, you can just file it off. There's no important electrical connections that go through there. Just make sure not to get too close to the pins. You'll see I accidentally blobbed a tiny bit of solder on the end here. That doesn't matter. It's going to be just fine. It doesn't really stick up height-wise, anything noticeable. And pop whatever keycap you want to on there, if I could actually get this on. There we go. And we have functioning Uno. Once you program this with QMK, it'll be ready to go, and you can tell it to do whatever you want. One thing to note, depending on the exact switch that you're using, you'll want to make sure that the pins don't touch any of the components down in here. And so this pin on this MX switch gets pretty close to one of these components, but it doesn't actually touch it. I have checked. So I've noticed some Alps switches sometimes have longer pins. So just something to be aware of and be careful of when you're putting this together. But this is now ready to go.